All right.
And it doesn't really get challenging until, say, 5 and 6. That's when you'll start.
I'll be the judge of that.
Okay, that's Welcome to Under Fire, burning questions about poverty and policy with the Port Angeles Food Bank. I'm Neil Dexter, Donor Relationship Manager at the Port Angeles Food Bank. Today's guest is Clallam County Commissioner Mark Ozias.
Hello.
Welcome. Thanks for
you.
coming. Thanks for joining us. Huge thank you to our hot sauce donors, Woodinville Sauce Company, Seafire Gourmet, and Bootsy's Sauce Company. Thank you so much. The show wouldn't be nearly as sweaty without you. Before we get started, Mark, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do as a county commissioner?
Yeah, you bet. I serve as the District 1 County Commissioner. District 1 is the east end of the county, so Sequim and surrounding areas. And county commissioners do an awful lot. Technically, we are both the legislative and executive branch of county government. But practically what that means is that I attend a lot of meetings, serve on a lot of local and regional boards, and work with lots of community partners to try and affect positive change here in Clallam County.
Cool. Sounds tough.
It is. It's also a really wonderful job. You get to meet an awful lot of remarkable people like yourselves who are doing really neat work in the community.
Well, cool. Yeah, thanks for being here. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right. Are you ready to get started?
Ready as I'll ever be.
All right. So, sauce 1 today. Dos Aches from Woodinville Sauce Company. Let's do this. Let's have a fiesta. Okay. Cheers.
Cheers.
Okay, Mark, let's start simple. What's your go-to comfort food, and what memories does it bring back?
Well, my go-to comfort food is probably a quesadilla. I think melting cheese inside of a tortilla is my first memory of comfort food of any kind. My mother used to call them cheese things. So I grew up eating cheese things, which I eventually learned were quesadillas.
That's fun.
I've probably eaten many thousands of them during the course of my life.
That's awesome. Sauce number 2, La Diosa Verde from Seafire Gourmet. All right, let's try this one.
Sounds like a good one.
Comes out a little faster too.
All right, what's this one called again?
Cheers again. La Diosa Verde, the green goddess.
La Diosa Verde. All right.
Almost got a little kick to it.
Good.
Clallam County has a strong sense of community. What's something you love about the way we show up for each other?
One of the things that I have really come to understand as serving as a county commissioner is how frequently people from different parts of the county are trying to work at similar goals or trying to solve similar problems. And often I think because of the geographic distance of our county, how different Sequim is, culturally and historically from Port Angeles, and how different both of them are from Forks and other parts throughout the county, have created some artificial lines of separation over the course of time. And I've really come to understand that when people have the opportunity to get connected with others who are working on similar issues or similar problems, they're always really welcome and open to the concept of working with others, or excited for the opportunity to work with other people and to work collaboratively, and really interested to see that sometimes some of the barriers that we perceive, or potentially real barriers that have existed in the past, don't have to be barriers any longer. And so it's really wonderful when we're able to see people come together to think about how we can have a more collective solution or suite of strategies to address a community problem.
Good collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that good? Yeah. Okay. Number 3, Santaka, Woodinville Sauce Company. All right, while you chew, I'll ask the question. Food insecurity can be invisible to those not looking for it. What does food insecurity look like in Clallam County today? Do you think there is a stigma associated with food insecurity in our community? It's kind of a 3-part question.
Yeah, I think food insecurity is easy to be hidden because very commonly it might be a child, it might be a student, it might be an elder, it could be anybody. I have a very distinct memory. Prior to being elected as county commissioner, I was the director of the Sequim Food Bank. And I have a very distinct memory of interacting with a client at the food bank who was very surprised to find himself there. He worked at a restaurant. He was a chef at a restaurant. The restaurant closed unexpectedly. Unexpectedly, he found himself at the food bank. He never thought he'd be there before. He's a father, a family man, had been working up until a couple days previous. So it really, you really don't know who is food insecure in this county. It could be any of our friends and neighbors, but often it's invisible.
Next up is garlic habanero from Seafire Gourmet. You do get the
Fruity.
orange. Yeah, that's good. All right, while you chew, I'll ask this one because this one's a mouthful. ALICE stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed. These are households that earn more than the federal poverty level, but not enough to afford the basics where they live. ALICE households and households in poverty are forced to make tough choices, such as deciding between quality childcare or paying the rent. That one's got a slow burn to it. 43% of Clallam County lives below the ALICE threshold. From where you sit, what are some of the biggest systemic barriers that keep people below this threshold and struggling to afford food? Ooh.
I think the biggest systemic barrier in our county is a lack of really great family wage jobs. There are a lot of barriers certainly, but the biggest one is barriers to employment. And we found in Clallam County that there are a significant number of people in their prime working age who should be working, who normally would be working, but either due to a transportation barrier or a childcare barrier or an educational barrier or health barrier or other barriers, or because the jobs don't exist, aren't really able to, earn enough money to afford to live and survive and thrive here. And so that's something that we're working really hard on from every angle, not only trying to ensure that there's enough of social services support network to help support and buoy people when they do need help, but also on the economic development end of the spectrum, really working to identify what are those barriers, how can we work to tear them down or remove them when possible, and what kinds of things can we do to create better jobs in this community that people want to work at, that are approachable, that are feasible for whatever their family or personal situation is, and that will help them earn enough money not only to survive and get by, but hopefully to thrive. So we're really trying to look at it from every angle. I don't know.
Sauce number 5, fire roasted Fresno from Bootsy's Sauce Company. It is technically listed as mild, so we're not into the heat yet.
All right.
Let's give this one. Whoa. Also.
This is Fresno chilies, you say?
Fresno chili.
Excellent.
Cheers, cheers. Cheers. I mean, it kind of hits you right away, but it's not a lot. Port Angeles used to be a logging town with union jobs and a strong working class base. As we've shifted to a service and tourism economy, what impact has that had on our community?
Well, it's had a lot of impact. Certainly, we're talking about a lot of the traditional family wage jobs certainly were in the forest management industry, and many of those jobs don't exist anymore, both because the environment has changed and because a lot of those jobs have become more mechanized. So it has really caused a lot of sense of loss, I would say.
Yeah.
Not only economic loss, but cultural loss and loss of identity. And so I think that to a large extent over the last number of years, this community's been working to redefine who we're going to be and what does that look like. And part of what we were just discussing around economic development and reducing barriers relates to that. But I think that really defining what our identity is moving forward is something that we continue to struggle with in a good way. Certainly tourism is an important element of our economy and important to our region, but that's not the end all and be all, and has some drawbacks that come along with it.
There's new challenges on
yeah,
top of
exactly.
solutions.
There's a very vibrant arts community, a thriving and growing arts community, which is really an important sector for any successful community and broad economy. There is a lot of innovative work going on in the forest products industry right now, which I'm very hopeful will help us to forge a new identity, and not just a distressed former timber community, but a community that's really leading the way. I see our county leading the way around the state in a lot of regards, and I look forward to being a county that's able to look out to the rest of the state and the rest of the country and really highlight some of the innovative, creative things that we're doing, whether that be in traditional industries like forest products or in new industries that we haven't thought about yet.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Number 6, aloha from hell. It does start to get a little bit spicy now.
Pineapple and a hint of ginger.
Just a hint, they said.
All right.
So we might not even taste it per se, but
only one way to find out, right?
Cheers.
Cheers. You can smell the pineapple.
I think that's the arbles that jump in.
Fun. All right.
All right. So, number 6. Some people in our community feel ashamed to ask for help when it comes to food. How do we shift the culture so that seeking support is seen as strength, not failure?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I actually think that's something that over the course of time, I feel like we've made some progress around. I would highlight efforts like the little pantries that are set up in a variety of places around the community that give people options. I think sometimes, usually when someone's scared to accept help or feels whether it's a sense of pride or whatever it is that keeps someone from asking for help, when eventually, I think 2 things. One is we need to continually talk to the community about how pervasive food insecurity is, what it looks like, remind people about all the different neighbors who are food insecure and what all those spaces look like. So I think there's a broad community education effort that is important to destigmatize anything that has a stigma, and certainly this is one of them.
Right.
In terms of people sort of graduating up to attending a food bank, if that's too much of a barrier, I want to highlight those little food pantries, because those do give people a way to accept help without it being without them going to the food bank. And I've spoken with several folks who who have found that is a way for them to accept help in a way that's comfortable for them, and that often leads them to ultimately showing up at a food bank for the first time. And usually once someone goes to a food bank for the first time and experiences the process, interacts with other people who are there, interacts with the volunteers, then they feel much more confident about going back to the food bank in the future. So
more comfortable.
Right. So from a community aspect, it's all about education and helping people understand the reality of food insecurity and what that means on an individual level. I think that all of our food banks in the county do such a great job of welcoming people once they're there. So if there are little things that can be done to help people feel a little bit more comfortable about accepting help of that kind, then all the better.
Yeah, like the little pantries, kind of like icebreakers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's a way to experience receiving help without having to interface with the person, and for many people, accepting help is one of the most difficult things that we do as humans, which is always interesting to me, because we know that when we actually help someone else or try to, it feels really good, and so why would it not translate to understanding that when we accept help from someone, that means that you're helping someone else feel really good. You know, but it does. It rarely, you know, we rarely think of it like that. And so, and you know, there are so many barriers that we put up for ourselves. And so that's one of the reasons why I think those little food pantries are sort of a way for some people to stair step into receiving the help that they actually need at that time. Yeah,
that's cool. Sorry.
The Reaper.
That was a really good answer. I like that.
This next sauce is the Reaper from Seafire Gourmet. Oh, geez, sorry. Here, I'll trade you if you want.
That's all right.
Kind of here. I'll match you. I'm sorry.
You don't have to apologize. We're good.
It came out really fast. Cheers.
Cheers.
Number 7, tourism brings money to towns like ours, but it can also raise housing costs and stretch local resources. We hear many stories of workers being priced out of town, restaurant staff, teachers, grocery workers. Whew. How do we make sure working people can afford to live in the communities they serve?
That is
spicy sauce.
That's a spicy sauce. Yeah, I think that really speaks to the importance of looking at our economy broadly and really thinking about what good family wage jobs are. And it's very common in the tourism industry, you know, really all over the country for, you know, the business owners who own tourism related businesses, you know, to generally do relatively well. But it's very difficult for their workers to support a family on that income. And so while tourism will always be an important aspect of our economy here in Clallam County, I think that working to broaden other job opportunities that give people the ability to earn a more competitive wage is really key. You know, this is a unique place to live. It's a remote place to live. It's an expensive place to live. Yeah, and you know, and there are many people who you know who have lived here for many generations. You know, their families sometimes for many generations, and it's really tough to think about how can we continue to afford to live in a place that has become so expensive. And you know, I don't see things getting less expensive in the future. That's not the way things usually work. So what that means is that policymakers need to work with others in the community to to figure out how we have better, more competitive, higher wage paying jobs. And while some of those may be in the tourism industry, I think many of those are going to be in other industries. So, you know, hopefully for folks who are struggling with full-time employment in the tourism industry now, if there were a more broad range of opportunities, other jobs that they could effectively apply for and have a satisfactory work experience that paid a living wage, then then at least there would be some options, and people wouldn't be essentially relegated into working a job that they might enjoy very much in the tourism industry, but that will never be able to pay them a family wage job.
Right. Well, I love the term you used earlier, to buoy someone, implying that as the tide rises, we bring everybody up with it.
That's right.
So, figuring out how to do that's the challenge.
Indeed.
Ooh, that one's good. That is a slightly spicy meatball. I'm learning that it's like, I'm a talker, and it's easier to talk with a mouthful of spice than it is to sit and listen calmly. Will you hand me the Bootsy? Yeah. Mango head. This one is delicious and kind of spicy.
All right.
It's definitely interesting, complex, and very, very spicy.
All right.
But not as spicy as the last two, we think. So Mark, what's missing from the way we currently approach poverty and food access in Clallam County, and where do you see room for real change?
What's missing? I don't think there's a lot missing on the, I'm not quite sure, on the food provision end of the spectrum, on the food bank end of the spectrum. I don't think there's a lot missing. I think that people who work to provide supportive food for folks in this community are doing an amazing job of working together, of coordinating, of collaborating, and that has not always been the case. That's been an intentional effort that food bank directors at the Port Angeles and Sequim Food Banks in particular, but all of the food banks in the county, have really worked to develop over the last number of years. Mm-hmm. The Peninsula Food Coalition is one of the outgrowths of that intentional effort. So I think on the food provision end, working with the community to ensure that the organizations that have taken on the responsibility of helping to feed people continue to be vibrant organizations that are able to be responsive to those needs as best as possible. I feel very confident that end of the spectrum is doing well. Unfortunately, doing well is something that food banks wish that they could put themselves out of business.
Absolutely.
But that's not the case. And so what that says to me as a community, where's the hole or where's the gap, or what do we need to be thinking about? Well, we need to be thinking about how can we have a community where fewer people need as much assistance, the gap is in affordable places to live. There's not enough affordable rentals. It's impossible for most working people to buy a house in this county. Yeah. So we've talked a lot in the last couple of answers about jobs and employment and the importance of family wage jobs. And so, that is certainly the case. But the other, sort of the other piece of the puzzle here is housing. And what does it look like to ensure that we have enough housing for people across all ends of the housing spectrum, and due to market dynamics and other factors, really by and large, the vast majority of houses that have been built in this county over the last number of years are custom high-end homes. You can't blame the developers for going to where the business is, but it's very difficult to actually build out housing stock across all ends of the spectrum. And so that's something that the county and cities are working very diligently at right now, with a variety of housing partners in the community to try and identify and support projects that will move the needle on creating more affordable housing. If someone's paying 50% of their monthly income on their rent, that means they don't have much left for food. Or other of life's necessities. So, really working to build out that housing stock, whether that is supportive housing for people who have behavioral health needs, for example, whether those are housing projects like Habitat for Humanity focuses on, where people put a little bit of sweat equity into their own home, whether that's more apartments in partnership with private developers. Really, it's all of the above. But I think that if I had to identify one place where I think that policymakers have the opportunity to make a difference and to try and improve the ability of people to be able to afford to live here and afford the basic necessities of life, really working to identify how we can expand housing opportunities is among the most important things we can be doing.
That makes sense. It's hard when you look at what the average Port Angelino can afford, and what the average home sale price is, and how large that disconnect is.
It's incredible.
Would you hand me that one, Ghost?
You got it.
Okay. Our next sauce is Ghost from Seafire Gourmet. Drizzle. Here we go.
All right, to the Ghost. Cheers. Nice.
Yeah. Not as.
No, it's a slow build.
Yeah. It'll get there. Right as you start to answer the question.
Excellent.
It'll kick in. All right.
My hands are hot, so something must be happening.
I keep getting the little right behind the ears. Many families have lived in Clallam County for generations, but rising costs are pushing them out. Is it important to you that families with deep roots in Clallam County can afford to stay here? And what responsibility do you think local leaders have to make that possible?
Yes, I do think that's important. That's something that I struggle with as an elected leader, honestly, because just the way that our governments are funded in Washington State as local governments, especially county government, is largely through property taxes. It's also property taxes that support our fire districts and school districts and library districts and hospital districts. So there are an awful lot of really important community services that rely on property tax revenue in order to exist. And without really significant structural changes in Olympia and a completely new tax system, that's just a reality, and that increasing property tax burden is very challenging for many people, and certainly is the case for families that have lived here for many generations. There's no doubt about that. And one of the strategies that some other counties have sought to employ, and I don't think this is an end-all and be-all, but it is something that I think would be worth some consideration, would be a homestead exemption of some sort for property taxes. And there are programs now where if you have sufficient acreage and you can make the argument that there's some benefit to the community, you can have some of your land categorized as open space, which lowers your own tax burden. For seniors who can't afford the property taxes, there's a program for reduced property taxes for seniors. So we could think about a similar program for homestead type properties that would at least be a step in the right direction toward helping to reduce those people's property tax burden. But the thing that's tricky about property taxes is that when I pay a little bit less because of an exemption that I might qualify for, that gets redistributed to everybody else.
Right.
The pie is the same size, so if I'm taking less of a piece and you're getting more of a piece, this is a reverse pie. This is a tax pie. You want a small piece of this pie.
Nobody wants tax pie.
So, there's only so much that programs like that can do. And to me, again, that speaks to the importance of thinking about actually implementing a program like that, but also recognizing that that's not going to go all the way toward addressing the challenge. The challenge continues to be that this is a very expensive place to live, and there aren't a lot of high-paying jobs. And there aren't a lot of places where people can afford to live such that they can work a low-paying job and live here and eat and send their kids to school and get health care and do all of the things that are the activities of daily life. So I think barring significant tax reform in Olympia, there are some ways we can nibble around the edges that will be somewhat meaningful to some people, but continuing to focus on how we have a more robust economy that everyone can participate in is probably the best thing that we can do.
How realistic would you think it would be to actually entertain some more robust changes to kind of extract some of the responsibilities away from property taxes? Because it is cost prohibitive to do some things, and I know with a big difference between Port Angeles and Sequim is that Sequim has a lot of taxable land, and Port Angeles doesn't because of the parks, and so you end up in a situation where you have a greater population but less taxable land, so schools suffer is probably the most glaring example that we've heard about in the last 10 years. Where do you think that could happen? Like, how realistic do you think that would be to see that changing a little bit?
That's an interesting question, because Washington has overall a very progressive legislature. There's large Democratic majorities in both the House and the Senate in Olympia. there's a lot of conversation about how regressive our state's tax code is, how heavily reliant on sales tax and property tax this state is. And so you would think that there would be a significant appetite amongst the legislators in Olympia for entertaining some really serious tax reform. However, I haven't heard a lot of conversation about that, so I don't know. I don't know how realistic that is. It seems like if the legislature, as it's currently comprised, is not going to tackle that issue in Olympia, I don't know when it will ever when it will get tackled. So I'm an eternal optimist. So you know, I there's always hope, but I don't think we can depend on that, which is why I keep circling back to, in this community, on the one hand, we need to continue supporting all the organizations that are comprised of volunteers and supported by donors that do so much of the work to provide supports for people who need it, and that we need to continue looking at the policies that we can affect and implement here on a local level to try and move the needle where we can.
Thank you, sir. All right, this one's fun.
All right.
You know, it's funny too. The ghost wasn't nearly as bad today. Like the Reaper was the hottest kick so far.
Yeah, no, I think so too.
But it kind of, I think it kind of inured us for the mango head because anyway. All right, our next sauce is Scorpion from Seafire Gourmet.
Tropic heat.
There we go. Okay.
So this is it, huh?
This is it, number 10. You've
All
made
right.
it.
Cheers.
Cheers.
I think I've gained momentum. Probably shouldn't have said that till after I took the bite, huh?
You've doomed yourself.
Mm-hmm.
This one's spicy. Now that your taste buds are destroyed, here's your platform. What do you want people watching this to do right now to help fight food insecurity in their community?
Well, the absolute best thing that anybody can do in this community is to find a way to support their local food bank. I think our food bank network is incredible. It is comprised of staff professionals and volunteers who have compassion and ability and capacity to meet whatever the challenge is. And so there are numerous ways for people to get involved. You know, of course, you can always write a check. There are lots of volunteer opportunities. There are food drives that go on throughout the year. So the easiest thing to do is to support one of the organizations that are working in the food insecurity issue. Now, if you want to get more involved, then there are several opportunities. There are a couple of volunteer committees at the county that don't relate specifically to food insecurity, but that really work with similar populations and try and address some of the connected issues that relate to food insecurity, like homelessness and housing challenges. So if, for example, you are interested in learning more about the homelessness system and how it interacts with all of the other community partners like food banks, then you might start paying attention to the Homelessness Task Force, which is an advisory board that the county hosts. You know, if you are interested in trying to help us understand how we can build more housing across all ends of the housing spectrum, right, then we've got a housing solutions committee that you might want to follow and think about participating in. You know, there are lots of ways to get involved that relate either directly or indirectly to food insecurity, right, but I really would encourage everyone who is interested in the subject at all to learn a little bit about their local food bank. We have vibrant food banks in every community here in this county. The story of how they work to support each other is really inspirational.
Yeah.
Over the last couple of years, our food banks have really worked to partner with local farms and local farmers to ensure that the kind of food that people want the most at food banks, which is fresh produce, is available. You know, how great that that's, you know, when possible, coming from local farmers. So there are a lot of really great stories happening at local food banks right now, and it's very easy to be inspired. So, you know, that would be my top recommendation, is learn a little bit about your local food bank, whatever town in this county you live in, and figure out how to get involved. You know, if your interest is more broad, then there are lots of opportunities. You know, it's a natural tendency for me sometimes to say, oh, well, you know, in a whatever this complex problem is, oh gosh, it's a miracle that so-and-so actually finally happened. You know, it's a miracle that we finally accomplished this. Well, guess what? It's never a miracle. It is always a result of individual people working very hard, thinking creatively, partnering with others, and persevering to actually see a project through. And so I like to remind myself anyway that while, you know, there may be some miraculous things that happen, by and large, all of the really remarkable things that happen in this community happen because of how people choose to work together, how we choose to support each other, and getting involved in whatever way makes sense to you is the easiest way to, you know, to make a difference. And you will likely find that the difference that you're making transcends your expectations.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate you coming. Yeah, this was fun.
It was fun for me too.
And enlightening and very interesting, and I hope you guys liked it too.
Thanks.
All right.